Yo no sé si... bueno. Ya. Buen día. Muy buenos días. Agradecemos colocarnos en posición para dar inicio a esta plenaria, por favor. Para nosotros, como siempre, un privilegio poder iniciar esta sesión que en mi país le decimos de lujo. Estamos ante una situación especial porque el tema que se va a desarrollar ahora es el concerniente a la telenefrología en nefrología, a la telemedicina en nefrología. Y para ello tenemos dos personas que se han destacado mucho en esta área. El doctor Carlos Zúñiga, que me acompaña aquí, que es el pionero de la telemedicina en nefrología y que ha desarrollado trabajos exquisitos en el campo de la educación y de la atención al paciente. Hay otro aspecto de la telemedicina que los chilenos, precisamente tus colegas, formaron la FUTAC. La FUTAC fue la forma de recolección de datos en la época del COVID, donde todo estaba cerrado y había la necesidad de ver cómo se iban a manejar las cosas con los pacientes en diálisis y en trasplante, y ellos tuvieron esa iniciativa y estuvo muy buena. Lo que quiere decir que Chile ha estado, número 1, en la atención en telemedicina, número 2, en educación y número 3, en registro. Así que como ellos tienen ese know-how de la telemedicina, yo quisiera que Carlos tuviera el honor de presentar al presidente de la Sociedad Internacional de Nefrología y de la Sociedad Japonesa de Nefrología. El hombre es presidente por todos lados, ¿eh? Entonces, Carlos, por favor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Es realmente un honor en estos momentos moderar esta mesa y tener la presencia de alguien tan importante como el doctor Masaomi Nangaku. Él, como ustedes saben, es el presidente de la Sociedad Internacional de Nefrología y eso es lo que nosotros sabíamos. Pero en realidad quiero agregar que hay dos cosas más. Él es presidente de la Sociedad de Medicina Interna y también de la Sociedad de Endocrinología en su país. O sea, tiene presidencia de 3 sociedades. Y lo más importante, el punto de vista humano, tiene 2 hijos y 2 nietos. Yo no sé a qué hora ni cuándo, pero lo hace. Así que, welcome, Dr. Naomi. It's a pleasure to hear. Thank you very much. Long trip. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, Guillermo, and all the members of this Slanh. Once again, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to be here. It is true honor and pleasure to present my talk. Today, I'm going to talk about telemedicine in nephrology. I have nothing to disclose in my talk. There are many ways to do telemedicine. You can use smartphones, you can use tablets, and you can use notebook computers, and there are many different systems to do telemedicine today. These are just a couple of examples to do telemedicine using smartphones in Asia. There are many different commercial vendors to provide these kinds of telemedicine. And there are many recent studies that showed the effectiveness of telemedicine. This RCT was performed to evaluate the effect of remotely delivered behavioral intervention to adults with obesity, which was published in JAMA last year. They remotely intervened and gave advice or these kind of things to obese people and found the remote intervention was successful to reduce body weight of obese adults. These are the remote digital intervention on depressive symptoms in patients with hypertension or diabetes. This paper published in JAMA was from Peru and Brazil. They gave digital intervention to patients with hypertension or diabetes, and the primary outcome was the PHQ-9, which is the depression module. This depression module scores each of the 9 DSM-4 criteria about depression. And this remote digital intervention successfully improved depressive symptoms in patients in Brazil and in patients in Peru. So obviously, telemedicine or remote digital intervention are effective in many ways. This is another example of telemedicine for management of diabetic patients in high complexity Latin American hospital. This telemedicine treatment for diabetic patients could maintain good control of blood glucose in patients. We also developed a new smartphone-based self-management system for diabetic patients, which we call Diabetics, and the new version, Diabetes Plus. We have the algorithm of the guideline of the Japanese Society of Diabetes within their central server, and based on the data which the patients get home, like blood glucose or blood pressure, the central server sends the advice back to the patients. And if the values are extremely abnormal, the central server gives the warning to a doctor, and the doctor contacts the patients directly. We performed RCT using this smartphone-based diabetics or Diabetes Plus, and observed an improvement of hemoglobin A1C in diabetic patients. China developed a very good system which is called Pin and Good Doctor. If you go to cities in China, they have something like a telephone box in the corner of the cities, and if you go into this telephone box like telemedicine box, you can get access to telemedicine anytime. And there is something like a vendor machine next to this telephone box. And you can get drugs, you can buy drugs based on the prescriptions which you can get in this telemedicine box. So this system is very convenient. China has a very large population, and currently 114 million patients are using this telemedicine system per year. Before COVID-19 time, the daily visits to this telemedicine system was 75,000 per day. During the COVID-19 pandemic, patients hesitated to go to hospitals, and it increased to 92,000 per day. And during the COVID-19 time, they realized this is very convenient and efficient. So currently, 115,000 patients per day are using this telemedicine system. In US, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic promoted telemedicine a lot, and it increased 50 times more during the COVID-19 time. And interestingly, those who used the telemedicine system most lived in big cities. They are middle-aged, relatively rich, and persons who live in big cities, and probably they are IT savvy, and they do not have any hesitation to use smartphones or tablets to get telemedicine. And they are very busy person. So they had a very good connection with the telemedicine system. How about doctors? This is the survey performed in Latin America. This survey got 1,700 responses from physicians, and general practitioners and specialists from bigger cities were more eager to start or to do telemedicine than those from small cities. Israel employed the telemedicine system very successfully during the COVID-19 time. If the patient stay at home due to COVID-19, an officer from the government comes to the front of the house and puts this telemedicine starting kit. The patient comes out from the house, picks this telemedicine box, and can start the telemedicine immediately. This telemedicine kit has many neat tools, such as saturation monitors or devices to hear lung sounds like this. So using full use of this telemedicine system, there was no death at home due to COVID-19 in Israel. It is a small country, but they very efficiently employed this telemedicine system. In Japan, there is the society which is called the Japanese Medical Sciences Federation. This is the biggest medical science society composed of 140 medical societies. And upon the request by the Ministry of Health and Labor of our government, we made recommendations about the online medicine, which is the telemedicine type reimbursed telemedicine system in Japan. And let's talk about telenephrology. Telenephrology is also effective to take care of patients with kidney disease remotely. There are many good evidence from Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic does a lot of telemedicine, and they do many researches on telemedicine. This is the patient categories of telemedicine with kidney disease. And probably you can guess you do not want to take care of patients who are very close to start dialysis remotely. So most of the patients who do telemedicine are CKD stage from G1 to G3, or those with hypertension. And the patient satisfaction was equally high between the face-to-face and telemedicine, telenephrology in this Mayo Clinic study. If we talk about telemedicine, we usually talk about the D2P type telemedicine, doctor-to-patient type telemedicine, but there are other ways of telemedicine, like D2D, doctor-to-doctor. This is the type of telemedicine in which an expert or specialist consults a doctor who does not have an expertise in that field. And you can also do D2P with D, doctor-to-patient with doctor. And this is the type of inpatient telenephrology. In this case, the patients have more AKI than the outpatient telenephrology. And once again, the inpatient telenephrology of AKI patients was relatively safe, equally safe, and effective if you do it in a correct manner. And using telenephrology improved access to nephrologists. This important study was published by Professor Zúñiga and colleagues, and they checked the changes in waiting time for in-person evaluations during the first 6 months of telenephrology. This improved the access of the patients to nephrologists very efficiently. Telenephrology was also effective in reduction of the costs. This study was published from the pediatric nephrology group in Australia. The estimated annual cost of the patients decreased a lot by doing telenephrology in Australia. This year, we had World Congress of Nephrology in Thailand, and before the World Congress of Nephrology, we had satellite meeting in Pattaya in Thailand. The Thai group are trying to use drones to get a PD fluid, dialysis fluid of peritoneal dialysis, remotely. If the patient is complaining about or getting suspicious about the peritonitis, they can send the samples of PD fluid remotely using drones. This is just a research stage, but they are trying to launch this system to the daily clinical practice in Thailand. There are many advantages of telemedicine. Important advantage is patient empowerment and engagement in self-care, and less impact on work and employment. Of course, it is good for health economy, as I discussed before. But at the same time, there are barriers to telemedicine. There are many difficult regulations about telemedicine, and sometimes technology may fail either spontaneously or during the service. And if we do more and more telemedicine, there can be a risk of data overload and user fatigue. If you develop a better system to get more physiological data from home, you will be overwhelmed by the large amount of data. In Japan, we usually see the patient, outpatient, once per 2 months or once per 3 months. And the patient can give us their physiological data or blood samples or urine samples just once or per 2 months or once per 3 months. But if you do it at home, you can do it continuously, and the data will be huge. And this can result in data overload. So in this case, we can use artificial intelligence to interpret the data. And let's talk about ChatGPT, because this is a very important topic today. This is a recent paper which reported the effectiveness of ChatGPT in medical license examination. They let ChatGPT to answer the examination of medical licensing, and the ChatGPT-4 got the score that it was equivalent to the third-year medical student in this study. And this paper is interesting because the authors wrote the conclusion by themselves, and at the same time, they let ChatGPT-4 to write the conclusion separately. And this is the conclusion ChatGPT-4 wrote after incorporating all the text data from the paper. And ChatGPT-4 concluded, this study suggests that ChatGPT has the potential to be used as a virtual medical tutor, but more research is needed to further assess the performance and usability in this context. So I think this is a very interesting paper. Recently, a Japanese doctor from University of Washington, Seattle, also led ChatGPT to solve the medical examination for medical licensing in Japan. In the Japanese medical licensing system, you have to get the good scores, and at the same time, you have to avoid making the wrong decisions, which is called prohibited choices. These prohibited choices are something like very critical. If you choose this kind of choice, you may kill your patient. That's the prohibited choices. And ChatGPT-4 passed all 6 years of the exams, though it substantially underperformed the student majority baseline. And unfortunately, ChatGPT-4 made a choice of some prohibited choices in this context. This is one example. This is one example of the case study of the medical licensing examination in Japan. A 40-year-old woman was referred to the obstetrics clinics due to a positive urine glucose test. She is currently at 30 weeks of gestation and no significant family or medical history. Her body stature was normal, no fever, pulse rate was okay, blood pressure is okay, and her blood glucose test was like this, fasting glucose 90, 1 hour glucose after the OGTT 190, and hemoglobin A1C was 5.4%. And you need to check the right answer. And here, the right answer is B. Recommend dividing meals into 4 to 6 portions per day. But the ChatGPT-4 selected E, which is the prohibited answer. So in this case, there are significant concerns about hypoglycemic agents during pregnancy due to the potential dangers, and you cannot choose E. And if you choose E, you will fail in the medical license examination, and ChatGPT-4 selected this answer. So the paper concluded that ChatGPT-4 generally performed well. However, their evaluation exposed critical limitations of the current large language system. Sometimes this system selected prohibited choices that should be strictly avoided in medical practice. So Nature, this February, published this. Large language models such as ChatGPT may generate incorrect but seemingly persuasive answers, and there can be some legal issues. The legal status of some large language modules, which were trained on content scraped from the internet with sometimes less than clear permissions, also remain unclear. And the journal Science published that science prohibits to use ChatGPT-4 to write your paper or figures because they don't think that's original. To be original, you have to write your paper or your figures by yourselves. So the editorial policy of Science was updated to specify that text generated by AI tools cannot be used in the work, nor can figures, images, or graphics be the product of such tools. That's the policy of Science. At the last of a couple of minutes or so, I'm going to talk about new devices for telemedicine. This field is advancing rapidly. Dr. Wan, a young dermatologist from Canada, developed this point-of-care wound visioning technology system. This is a software which you can use using this smartphone. And this Swift wound software application provides a very reliable and accurate wound measurement that helps improvement of the skin lesion care. This system is being developed by a group of neurology in Japan. They combine motion capture technology with head-mount display, and you can recognize the movement disorder of the patients in a 3D manner. So they are now trying to remotely take care of patients with neurological disease, movement disorders. This smart toilet was developed by Stanford University. The patients can be recognized by the fingerprint and anal print, and the toilet automatically analyzes your urine and stool, and if there is some abnormality, this smart toilet will give the warning message back to you. This lab-on eyeglasses was developed by a group from Thailand. As a nephrologist, we want to check eGFR, and these special eyeglasses take up a small amount of tears and measure creatinine in tears and assess kidney function. It is important to use the very small amount of samples which can be obtained non-invasively for telemedicine. And this group also developed the patch system to measure sweat creatinine. Thailand is a very hot country, and some outside workers develop rhabdomyolysis and acute kidney injury. And they are going to monitor creatinine in sweat and give warning before the development of acute kidney injury under a very hot and humid condition in Thailand. This is Dr. Somea, who is a dean of the Department of Engineering of our university, and he is an expert of wearing devices. Using these wearing devices, you can get a various and large amount of physiological data from home continuously. So if we start using these kind of systems at home, probably the way to take care of patients change dramatically. Last year, we published the book, which is called Innovations in Nephrology with Geraldo. And we asked Professor Carlos Zúñiga to contribute an article, a very important article about telenephrology. And he contributed a beautiful, comprehensive review article about telenephrology. What is important is telemedicine is not replacing face-to-face medicine. Telemedicine is complementary and supportive, and face-to-face medicine is also complementary to and supportive to face-to-face medicine. So by combining these two modalities to take care of patients, we can increase the quality and the effectiveness, usefulness of medical system dramatically in the future. And this is my last slide. Once again, I'd like to encourage all of you and your colleagues to join World Congress of Nephrology, which will be held in Buenos Aires next year. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yomani. Thank you. It's a very interesting conference. It's wonderful to be here, okay? Estamos con problema de tiempo, nos acaban de avisar, así que las preguntas vamos a tener que dejarlas pendientes, pero quiero agradecer... Thank you very much, Doctor, for being here. And les quiero pedir un aplauso por la interesante conferencia. Muchas gracias.
Aunque se lo dije en privado, lo digo en público. La aplicación de medir la creatinina a través de la telemedicina, ¿verdad? Del estudio que le estaba presentando, pudiese representar un avance significativo para manejar o para detectar los pacientes con nefropatía mesoamericana. Uno de los principales factores de la enfermedad renal crónica de causa no tradicional en Centroamérica es el calor, las altas temperaturas. Inclusive los grupos de trabajo que van a hacer las mediciones en el campo, a ellos en ocasiones se le ha subido la creatinina haciendo las mediciones. Lo que quiere decir que con esta forma pudiésemos tener un gran avance en la prevención de esa enfermedad. Y eso es más o menos lo que estaba yo hablando en privado con el doctor para ver cómo nosotros podemos seguir contactando. Bueno, sin más, y también quiero aprovechar, porque fue citado el doctor Carlos Zúñiga en la sesión, para felicitarlo y para estimularlo a que siga adelante con los trabajos en telemedicina que él está desarrollando. A continuación pasamos